I am 24, and I was born in the U.S. in Virginia, but grew up in North Carolina.
Have you gone back to Ethiopia?
Yes, I've been once when I was 13. It was my first time. I think my mom had been away for like 14 years. And yeah, and I'm trying to go back next year in 2 years. We've been trying to go back sooner, but conflict and stuff makes it hard. I think my dad is Gondar, and my mom's side is Oromo and Amara, I think.
Okay.
But I could be wrong.
Is it not really discussed in the family?
I think my mom is like still learning as well. Like I think she recently figured out that I think our family originally is Oromo, but there was like name changing for protection that happened. I know for sure my dad is Gondar, but my mom, I think she's still trying to figure out like what's true and what isn't. Especially because when I was younger, she would talk about all these things and I just didn't understand it until I was older.
Yeah,
it's like, oh, now these make sense. Growing up, I didn't understand ethnic groups beyond like the dances, like and music. Like that was the only thing I understood. Like okay, like this is Gondari music. Like this is how you dance for like Oromo music. I guess I was too naive or like didn't really think that politics played a role when I was younger because I was just like, oh, we're all Ethiopians. When I was in college, I feel like is when I really became more aware, and also with all the conflicts that were going around and stuff that was happening to Oromos and Tigrays, like that's when I started to understand a little more. Growing up, it was just like I was Ethiopian. Like I grew up in an immigrant neighborhood. Everyone was from everywhere, and we like, it was always just like, oh my gosh, you're from here, and that was it. Like that was like there was no like making it a huge deal because we were all from somewhere. And so it was just like acceptance. Like I feel like ideal acceptance, where it's just like you don't even question anything. You're just like, oh yeah, they're just from there, and then that's that. So for me, growing up, I was like, I'm always just Ethiopian, and then I think I always just heard Habesha in the context of that. And the way I understood it, and even how I explain it to people, is just like, oh, it's like saying Latinos. Like, it's just like a generic term to describe Ethiopians and Eritreans. That was how I understood it and used it for most of my life until recently, when I also learned that not everyone identifies under Habesha.
It's interesting for me to have this conversation because I feel like growing up it was still so tense, and like we were very much like our country just got independence, you got Eritrean, but then like moving to Washington DC when I was 8, then everyone was like Habesha. Yeah, and that's like when I was introduced to it. So that's why it's interesting talking to people in the diaspora, and I think like also young people versus older people, because I feel like for us like we're all just like whatever with it, but I think we do have opinions, and those opinions are informed by like you said, politics and stuff, but
yeah, and like your parents' politics and there's like so many layers of things. And now looking back, I'm like, oh, like, because I think when growing up, everyone, at least the community in Charlotte, was a little more like together. Like politics didn't really affect, from what I understood, our main grocery store in Charlotte, the owner is Eritrean. Everyone loves her, and like I want to say there's more Ethiopians. But then we all like went to one church if you were like practicing Christianity, and then something happened midway. I still don't know what happened. Something political, religious, and everyone just split. Now it's just like it's very obvious that people don't talk to each other. So yeah. The dog's on something. It was weird. Especially it was weird for us kids because we all grew up together. And then all of a sudden we were separated. So I didn't have Habesha friends until now. Yeah, like all of us kind of grew up separate. And it was like really sad. It's like, for what?
Yeah.
We're already away from home, you know, like, and then now you want to divide the kids, and yeah.
What does the word Habesha mean to you?
For me, before I learned that not everyone identified as Habesha, I used it as like a positive way. Like it was like, this is us all uniting together. Like I had a very optimistic, positive view. Like I loved Ethiopian culture and food and music and dance and like language, like everything. And my sister, who I just recently met, she's Eritrean, Italian, and Ethiopian, and so I've been getting more into like Eritrean culture and history, and like she grew up in the war, and so I've been learning a lot from her, and so it was just always a positive thing for me, and like that's what like Habesha meant. I was just always proud to use it and like say it and like describe it to people, like, oh yeah, these are Habeshas, and like proud to be Habesha, like all these things. And then I like learned that not everyone felt that way. And that I think forced me to kind of like get out of the naive bubble and kind of like really understand the role Ethiopia has like played and like, or the government has played and just like fucking people's lives up and like vice versa, you know, like just like all the politics and the conflicts and everything like that. Like I think that was easy to brush aside when it doesn't affect you because we're the diaspora. Like when our family was in danger, and like that's when things were like real. Like that's when you're like, it's not just like a distant I think there's a lot of romanticization of the African continent and like, you know, like kings, queens, like black power, like all these things. It's beautiful, and I think it's like imagination is so important to any diaspora group, but it oftentimes erases or leaves behind like nuances, complexities, realities, how things are current day to day. So I think that my relationship with Ethiopia growing up was like the motherland, like this is like where everything good comes from and all these things that I was able to extract from that, like all the good stuff. I think in any identity, like you see the good and the bad, and so it's like there was a moment of like, do I want to call myself this? Like, am I proud to be Ethiopian? Like all these things. And I'm just kind of like my current conclusion or like current idea is just like you can acknowledge the bad in a situation or like in an identity or like the history or current effects and just like work towards making that better in your own way and still also be proud to be that person. Like it's conflicting, you know. It's like, I think I always had that balanced idea of being American, but like I didn't get there yet with being Ethiopian because that was just all things good. And so the term Habesha, like I feel like I still use it where I'm just like, oh, Habesha is like where the Habesha is in New York, like all that stuff. But yeah, I think, I don't know, I'm still working on that and understanding what that means today. And again, this does erase so much, but in my mind growing up, when I saw so much like tension, I just never got it. Like I was like, we're all away, y'all are all away, especially the parents, like y'all are all away from your home. Like, why do you not want to be with the people who are similar to you or have similar cultures, Ethiopian or Eritrean wise? Like why? And that's something that was interesting talking to like parents or older folks, Habeshas, or like, yeah, Habeshas that I found here in the city, and them being like, even if we have political tension or something, we still kind of stand by each other because we're such a small community. Whereas growing up in Charlotte or in Imagine in Atlanta or a DMV, like there's so many of us that it's so easy to just be like, okay, well, I'm just not gonna talk to you, or like I'm just like gonna be separate from you, because there's so much choice. Whereas like smaller communities, it's like, well, like unless you're personally responsible for killing my family, like I have to be near you because you're the closest thing that I have to home. And so growing up for me, I was like, well, like why do we not want to be referred to as something together? Like why do we not, like I try to use it more as like a positive situation, like a bridging the gap situation where it's like we're Habeshas, like we should love each other and this and this and this. And again, that's super naive and like especially like Habeshas are just like so intense with politics, and like I didn't realize how much so until I went to Italy and met some people there because I was working on a project and they were so intense, and I was like, but like why? You know, like I get it, like not why, because like there's definitely valid reasons why certain people don't associate or like groups, political groups, all for sure. But like there's just no room for conversation. And I think that goes back to like what I love about your project is like let's at least be in conversation. Like not just complete shut off. And like it's just gonna continue to create generations of people not wanting to talk to each other because the kids just follow what their parents do, especially if you don't leave. Like if you just keep staying in your community. And so for me, like Habesha is maybe not, like I guess I want to continue to use it, but more of like what I hope that we could be, like more united and more in conversation with each other, and I don't think we're there yet. And so I guess I kind of use it now more of like a hopeful, idealistic, optimistic way.
You know where the word comes from, or like do you have any background in origins?
No.
And then when you think about the word Habesha, I guess like visually, like what comes to mind for you?
I think it's all encompassing for me, like culture, music, food, the way like we look, like there's like a look Like someone walks down the street and like you can for the most part be like, oh yeah, they're probably Habesha, or just like East African. I feel like within the community, colorism is so huge. Just like don't play outside too long, you'll get too dark, or like I've heard a lot with like hair texture. I feel like that's a huge one. Like I have looser curls and I used to straighten my hair a lot, and like that was all anyone would focus on when we were in church. It was kind of annoying, or it was just like, oh my god, like your hair is like so nice, like keep it straight, like all these things. Now that I think about it, people always had their hair straightened, which is why I always straighten my hair. It wasn't until the pandemic started that I was like, wait, like, no, I don't know.
I always thought it was weird that, yeah, like people straighten their hair so much when you're like known for curly hair.
Yeah. Growing up, it was always straight hair. Like that was always what was pushed. The only exposure I've gotten to being made aware that not everyone identified as Habesha was there's this one girl who we were in college together, and she's Oromo, and she's posting a lot about just like awareness of just like background, history, things that I hadn't learned about because I just never learned about or was exposed to like histories of different ethnic groups. And I think that's when she talked about Habeshas, and I had started this project originally that was called Habesha Net, which is like essence of being Habesha. And then I switched it because I was like, I'm not comfortable using that anymore because I don't fully understand the nuance with it or like the context. And whenever I feel like I've looked things up, I don't find much information. Like you can find, and that's too, like when you ask what's the origin of Habesha, I feel like I've read so many different kinds of like backgrounds that I just don't know what's true. And rarely would I find information, at least online, that's not like caught up like in like some obscure journal. 'Cause I remember she posted resources. I have it saved somewhere, and it was just like really very specific journals. And her and I never had a chance to talk. So I think she was like a year or two under me, and it was the pandemic. And so I never got to be in conversation with her, or like, and I wish I had been able to like reach out to her and be like, I would love to learn more. Like most people I talk to are just like our age. So I feel like there's an understanding of like when we use the word Habesha, it's just like we're using it as just like a quick reference of like especially I think I've used it more recently being like, where are the Habeshas in New York? And then they like know what I mean and we just keep going from there. But I did change my project name to Roots because I was like, now that I know that there's like people who don't feel that way, I don't want to use it because the whole point is to like explore Eritreans and Ethiopians, and so I don't want to use a term if people don't feel comfortable with it until I feel like I'm more like understandable about it. But I haven't had the chance to like talk to someone who would be able to provide more, which I think is so interesting to hear you say like people don't feel comfortable, because I haven't come across anyone yet that's been like, actually I don't want to be known to as Habesha. So that's really interesting to me. Is it people our age?
I think older, because like basically, like, I grew up with my aunt. She would, like, basically be on osmarino.com, which is, like, this Eritrean political website, and, like, they just talk on there. I guess, like, Clubhouse for old people back in the day.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I remember I would start seeing those conversations where people, I mean, or even within, I guess, like, yeah, just, like, randomly throughout the Eritrean community, I would just hear it sometimes, just, like, you know, our family doing diapers to call ourselves Habesha, like, we're Eritrean, versus like my aunt who's in DC, like when I moved, and like I was getting a lot of negative reactions by telling people I was Eritrean because they'd be speaking to me in Amharic, and I'm like, and then it's this whole thing, and then where's the same, and I'm like, I don't understand, and my aunt was just like, you know, if you want to avoid all that shit, like just say you're Habesha, and like that's how I was introduced to the word.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's why I've always had like a weird relationship to it.
Yeah.
Versus like my dad's family grew up in Ethiopia, so they're very much like, yeah, we're Habesha, whatever. Or I know like people in California, like a lot of Bay Area folks who are here like are fine. But also like with Eritreans, I've found it's always, yeah, I'm Habesha, I'm Eritrean. Like if you ask me, I'm Habesha, yeah, I'm Eritrean. Like every single person will do that. Versus with Ethiopians, that's what was interesting when I started seeing things on Twitter, because I was like, oh, okay, like Oromo people also feel that way.
No, that makes so much sense, and that's something too. I think growing up Ethiopian, like since I wasn't exposed to certain conflicts, or like my family wasn't affected much, I think there's just like the taking it for granted. I just didn't know about a lot of stuff that Ethiopia has done to so many groups. Like I feel like it was always presented to us as just like, oh yeah, you're Ethiopian, be proud of that. That's something that, like, looking back, you're just kind of like, damn, like, I'm ashamed. But, like, it just comes with, I think, just, like, not knowing. I don't know. I think it's so easy being out away from home and just being, like, super proud of where you're from, because that's what you have to hold on to since you're different from everyone else. Mm-hmm. But then, like, it just, yeah, it's just so complicated.
And and I think like that's kind of like the nuance of the word is like there's a lot of like erasure and harm, but also like it is like a tool for community building. Like there's a reason why we still use it. I guess generally speaking, like how do you feel as an Ethiopian within like the broader like African community? I don't know, like do you have like any conversations that tend to happen when you speak to other Africans, or like patterns of conversations?
One thing that I've recognized is like I feel like when Americans or the world think of Africans, they think of West Africans, or like a lot of the history you learn is West African history or South African history, and then North Africa is its own, considered their own entity. That's a whole other conversation. But I feel like growing up I would get frustrated like being like, where's the East African history? Like why am I not able to learn about something else? Like it wasn't until I studied abroad my junior year of college that I learned there was a slave trade in East Africa as well, that like the Middle East was involved in, like, and there was trading happening both ways. So I've been to Morocco and Ghana, and that was very interesting because when I was in Morocco, and that was I think when I truly understood how other people in Africa, not truly, but like got a glimpse into how other Africans saw Ethiopia. I went to Ghana. That was so interesting because a lot of people first thought I was Indian, and I remember being like, what are you talking about? Like what? And then I vividly remember this one guy, we were on our way to a market, and he was like, he kept saying like namaste, namaste, and I was like, oh, I'm not Indian, I'm Ethiopian. And the way everything changed, like he was like, oh my God, you're Ethiopian. Like my sister, like we love Ethiopia, like y'all stood up and like whatever, and like strong and like all these things. And I kid you not, I got so many discounts. And these are older people. Yeah. And so it was like their understanding of Ethiopia may be tied to like Pan-Africanism, especially the relation with Ghana and Ethiopia. Like, I don't know. It was one of those things where it's just like, again, like Ethiopia's not all good. Like they did their fair share of taking over Eritrea and like harming people. But like we're seen as like good, and like, and then same like when I was in Europe, when I ran into a lot of Africans who were either migrants or refugees, especially in Italy, because I was working on a story about Eritrean and Ethiopian refugees, migrants, immigrants, and asylum seekers. My mentor guided me to say, don't say you're from American, just lead that you're from Ethiopia. And that came more into play because like they were like, if you say you're from America, no one's going to want to talk to you because like of U.S. policy fucking everybody up. So that also led to some interesting conversations. And my mom will show me videos too, like historical videos of just like leaders of Ethiopia being like, we're not black, like we're European, but we're just like darker skinned, and like just like so much. I think Ethiopians struggle with not being comfortable being black and like what that means. And that has been very interesting to uncover, and like even conversations with like people at church being like, oh, we're not black, or like this, and we're like, the police isn't gonna give two fucks if they pull you over. Then be like, oh, you're Ethiopian, you're good. Like no, like you're black. And like I've traveled and like been to different parts of the world, and like the first and foremost thing people see is you being black. Like it's just like that is what it is. I don't think I've ever felt that I don't belong. I think in the context of like the U.S., there's conversation around that, and I think when you have conversations about like blackness, like there's like Black Americans and then there's African, and then just like learning that distinction. I remember in college that was like a huge thing because I never had to think about that growing up because again, everyone was from everywhere. Like my elementary school and middle school were so diverse, and so we never really talked about being black because we were just like your ethnicity or like where your parents are from was the first and foremost thing, and then that was it. We never had to explore beyond that. And it wasn't until I got to college, where I went to PWI, where all of a sudden, like, I had to, like, think about what it meant to be Black and see the effects of it, and then, like, also dive deeper into the nuances with the Black community, like the Black student movement, just, like, learning about all the nuances and stuff. Like, that's when everything kind of fully formed. But even then, like, it was always in conversation. Like, I feel like there was, like, some diasporic wars, like, that always comes through. It always cycles through. But, like, that's, I think, when I really solidified my comfort in being who I am, and, like, never really felt challenged about it. Like, we were always just in conversation. And then I, like, got out into the world, and I feel like that's just been the same case. And I think it helped that, like, we went to a very racist school, so at the end of the day, we're all, like, we all have one common person to work against, so at the end of the day, you can have the debates and stuff, but, like, we gotta work together to survive and, like, help each other out. And I think that's what really brought us all together. If I see another African, it's instant solidarity for me, where I'm just, like, African girl, African guy, like, we're chilling, brothers, sisters. Like, that's, like, what I always geared towards. Growing up, most of my friends were East African, so, like, Somali, Sudan, East African. And then in high school, I don't think I had many African friends because I don't think we had a huge community. If they were Ghanaian or Nigerian. And then in college, my final year, my roommates were Ghanaian, and I would say from the Caribbean were most of my friends. I feel like it also I feel like the only time it would come up was, like, when you meet and you're like, oh, where are you from? And then they'd say where they're from or their roots, and I'd say it, and then that was it. And, like, it would come up in, like, music or, like, clothing or food, but that was it. So, like, I've never really thought about, like, oh, this person's from here. Like, we just, like, were. Everyone was just from everywhere, so I never really thought about it.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to think back and be like, where was that person from? Like, unless it came up with food or, like, and that was it.
Ghanaians and Nigerians are everywhere, but I feel like, I don't know, at least the way I perceive it, I feel like this is the first time where Ethiopians and Eritreans kind of, like, have that same cultural currency. Like, I guess we have, like, a few celebrities now. What's up. And I feel like we've always been, like, at a disadvantage, like, for globalization just because, like, we don't speak English. But it's, like, starting not to matter as much, which is also interesting. Like, people are just, like, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit exotifying, but people are just, like, really intrigued by our culture and like, what's going on over there.
No, that's such a good point. That's a really good point. I think, too, like, I can't remember who I was talking to. Maybe it was another Ethiopian. But them being, like, one thing they loved about Ghanaians and Nigerians was they were so loud and proud about where they're from. And I think that's why that always sticks out. I'm like, I know for sure I had Ghanaian and Nigerian friends because they were so loud about it. And it was, like, in a good way. Like, it was just like, oh, I'm Ghanaian. Like, or, like, jollof rice, like, ours is better. Like, all these, like, so that's why I think it's always in my head. And, like, when I had Twitter, like, that's what I always saw was, like, Ghanaian and Nigerian.
And, like, some things I think about are, like, you know, in Silver Spring, Maryland, where I'm from, like, they have Amharic everywhere now because there's so many Ethiopians. In Uganda, specifically in Kampala, like, the Eritrean government built an Orthodox church there. So, like, they're, like, setting roots in these other countries. But, you know, to be... like, Eritrean or Ethiopian, and kind of, like, as we discussed, like, not everyone thinks they're Black. That's a well-known fact by the world. Basically, they don't want to fit in the, like, racial structures of other countries. Like, if you look at South Africa, they're like, we're not Black, we're not white, we're not colored, like, we're HABESHA. And everyone's like, well, what does that mean? And they're like... Or, like, in the United States, it's like, we're Black, but, like, I think... I would like to believe that they don't have the language to, like, be politically correct when they say this, but I think what I've heard is, like, we're Black, but, like, it's just they are Black Americans, like, we have this, and, like, I think you were talking about, like, having a balanced American identity, like, how does that interact with your or Ethiopian identity? We can start there.
I think you touched on something super important that I would hope we get to, where it's, like, just because someone identifies as, like, being, because I will say, like, I'm Ethiopian, U.S. American. And, like, the reason I make the differentiation between American and U.S. American is super small. Well, it's not super small for some people. But when I was studying abroad, we went to Brazil. We went to South America, several countries in South America. And they were like, don't say you're American. And we're like, why? And they were like, well, they'll just be like, we're also American. We're South American. You're American. Everyone thinks the U.S. And so, like, that was my small way of being, like, I'm Ethiopian, U.S. American. But someone else could be like I interviewed this like playwright, super talented guy in Italy, and he identifies as Italian with Eritrean roots, even though his dad was Eritrean. And it also just depends on the context. Like, that was something I fully, like, came to terms with when I went to Italy. I have a love-hate relationship with Italy, and, like, I've been there several times. And I'm going on a tangent, but it is related. But, like, it was when I came to realize all the ways that which you can be seen affects how you'll be treated and how you see yourself, depending on where you are. So, like, when I was in Italy, immediately people think she's African because, like, the context of so many migrants, refugees, asylum seekers. One time this lady dropped her keys, and I, like, went to pick it up and gave it to her, and she before looking up at me, she responds and says "Danke" in German, thank you in German. And I, like, studied German a little bit, so I was, like, scoping my brain to say "you're welcome." And right when I was about to say it, she looks up and kind of just, like, gets, like, flustered, and she's just like, "Oh, merci," like, and, like, ran off the train. And I was like, why did she, like, respond to me in French? And then I realized because there's so many French-speaking Africans who were in Italy, she immediately just assumed I was West African, or, like, but then when I would be in the context of other Africans, like, they would see me as Ethiopian. But then when I was in the context of Ethiopians and Eritreans, which was what my project was focused on, they'd be like, you're American, like, you're not fully Ethiopian. And so, like, identity is always shifting depending on the context of where you're in. And then here in the US, like, I feel like blackness comes more into conversation versus, like, when I was in Italy and I was speaking to these, like, Ethiopian elders, they were like, why do y'all worry so much about race? Like, it doesn't matter. Because I think the conversation in Italy is more related to, like, origin of country, at least in the context of our conversation there. And so it was hard to explain, like, well, when you're in the U.S., there's a very specific history with Black Americans and just, like, the word Black, and, like, race is assigned to you by other people. It's not, like, biological, you know, it's just, like, it's how people see you. All these there's so much nuance, but it just depends on who you're talking to. Like, it just depends. And so, like, I think that is what I hope for, is, like, more space for nuance and conversation and empathy and grace to be, like, introduced, and being like, okay, well, like, why is it, you know, this way? Or, like, why do you think that? Or why do you not think that? We don't all have to fit nicely in, even the word Habesha, like, it doesn't have to fit nicely into a box. Like, acknowledge then, like, what someone else wants to be called, or, like, why is this not the case, or, like, all this stuff. But then also, like, using the word Habesha, like if you're in another country, it's just easier to be like Habesha because that's your unifying force in that environment, versus, like, if you're in another environment, you may be more, like, hesitant to use it. And, like, I think it confuses, like, I have my friends who, like, they get confused sometimes when I'm just like, yeah, Habesha, like, but then, like, when I'm talking to someone else, they'll be like, wait, but you confidently used it there. And I'm like, well, it depends. Like, it depends on what the context is and who I'm talking to. I'm a very, like, roundabout speaker. I feel like I've been saying the same thing over and over again.
It's
but,
important,
like,
though. I feel like, yeah, that's, like, what's motivating me to do this project, because I think at some points, like, I've gotten, like, tired, but I'm like, I keep seeing this conversation pop up, like, in so many different places, and I'm like, to your point, like, media matters, so I'm like, at least, if anything, like, this can just start the conversation, and however people want to respond, that's whatever. But yeah, I just think that, like, this needs to be discussed because it is complicated. And I think, like, also talking about context, it's like, yeah, like, we can't deny, like, the anti-blackness that comes from Ethiopia and Eritrea, but also there's plenty of Africans that also don't identify as Black, because they're
exactly.
like what you were saying about Italy is, like, why would I identify as Black? Like, I'm from this country, I know where I'm from. Some of the flack that we get is deserved, but I think also some of it is, like, people projecting a lot because of, like, just the position that Ethiopians and Eritreans hold, whether it's in the media, popular culture, but also, like, history. Like, Ethiopia is highly regarded. So
it's complicated. And I think my biggest thing, like, I remember talking to Polly, like, right when she was about to start Black Women Photographers.
And how did you guys get connected?
We had a mutual who did, like, writing with her, and then she connected us, and, like, we met right before she was starting it. She initially was going around doing interviews with a couple of people that she found to include, and I don't think she ever put those in, but we had a conversation about it. And I remember being like, I think what's so important about having more Black women photographers is, like, for the most part, the narrative over time of any group, but specifically Black people, has been a specific narrative. And, like, the importance of having diversity in any type of media form is that it allows for, like, more holes in a story to be told. Like there's not going to be one collective story. I mean, there is like, you can like pull out like a narrative, a summary, whatever. I like to think of it as like a puzzle piece, and like we only have like the outer rim put together, but like the more diversity you get, the more nuance and diversity you get, like as minuscule as you can, like, and you just add the little tiny little pieces, it just like creates more of a complicated story. And I think that's the goal, is like, and there's this really good article I'm gonna send to you. I've been like on this article for, it's changed the way I see journalism and storytelling. But basically the idea is like, we've simplified storytelling too much. Like the point should be to complicate it, not to make it simple for people to understand. When we make things so simple, we narrow down our identities to binaries, like you're Democrat, you're Republican, or like you're this and that. It's so complicated. It's like also so important, but like at the same time, complicating things is necessary, because then it allows people to like have more like empathy. Like it allows people to like think through things a little more than just being like, oh, they're this, like, and that's it. You have your preconceived notions and you kind of shut down. There's no conversation. And that's like the whole issue we have right now, I think, in our society, in any type of situation. So I feel like it's so important to complicate things, which is why I love this, because it's like anything that further complicates stuff, like you're adding these different voices and like these different ideas. Someone can read it and be like, oh, I didn't ever thought about it that way, and like may not agree, but that's not the point. The point is to allow for the space for the conversation to start. And there's this quote from this one book I read where it's like, dialogue is often the most important part, not the consensus. Like rarely do you have to reach consensus for things, except for like politics and like things you're voting for. Like there's tangible stuff you need to like reach consensus for, like what do we eat for dinner or whatever. But like the conversation is what's important. I think with Ethiopians and Eritreans, there is no conversation that happens. Like it's just like you say you're this and that's it. Like you say you're Oromo and that's it. Like you say you're, and people shut down, and it's just like nothing. As I've met Ethiopians and Eritreans around the world, they're equally surprised. Like they're always surprised to hear that we exist in another state. But then they have judgments about that. Like I like come across people who are like judge people for being in this country or like this country, and they have a perception of that, and I'm like, oh my god, what are you talking? We're all like, we all have a similar, like what? But yeah, I think complicating the narrative, which is the article title, is so important. You're complicating shit, and that's good, because like that's what we need to like force people to be like, oh shit. Like already in our conversation, the things you've told me, I'm like, damn, like I need to like think through things, or like
I appreciate that. Yeah, and I mean this conversation has helped me a lot too, I think. Yeah, just like hearing a new perspective, and I feel like making me realize that like people can benefit from this, which I think like I know that intrinsically, but I think when you sit with like information for a while, you're like, is this tired? I'm like, no, I'm just tired of it. Have you done a lot of migrant focused work?
I'd taken photos randomly of Ethiopians and Eritreans when I first picked up my camera, but never unified it as a project until one day I came across a BuzzFeed article. It was December of 2018, I think. The headline was, "Inside the country you can buy a black man for $400. And that's always stuck with me. And like I remember reading it, and like it was about the modern day slave trade that happens out of Libya into the EU, specifically funnels into Italy and then outwards. It was disgusting. Like they have rankings for like how much people get sold. Like Ethiopians and Eritreans get sold for more because of all the things we've talked about, and
like based on like colorism and texturism.
Yeah, and like position in the world or in the continent. It's like what we talked about. Ethiopians and Eritreans have a certain like perception of, or like are perceived by certain countries as like better in some regards, and so they were worth more. One of the main program directors was Eritrean, I believe, and I was like, yo, this is my real intention, where I want to go and like photograph the migrants, Ethiopian and Eritrean migrants, asylum seekers, refugees, and immigrants was the category. And would I be able to like on the side work on this and like be covered under your program? And she was like, yeah, do what you want. And so I like got some grant money from the school, I got some money, and like they sent me out there. And so for the first month I had to like study food stuff, but then like the second month I was on my own to do what I wanted, because otherwise like the school wouldn't have sent me to be like, yeah, like you want to go, because like the mafia was involved. There's a lot of like dangerous shit where it's like I'm 20 years old, not that experienced in journalism, like it's not going to be safe to send me out there. No one would have done it, but I just like hid it under this other project. I came across a lot of migrants, refugees, and it was very intense, and it really complicated my relationship with Italy and just like Europe and like the world. Like I went through so many different crises, but like there are people I came across who, like this one person, of his story, it's just like still gets me, where he's from Eritrea, and one day someone stole his car, and like so he was on the way to like get it, and then the guy like hit him over with the car. He ended up like fracturing his spine, hip, all these things. He was a teacher, so I think his students helped raise money to send him to Germany to get treated, and they treated him, but then like they were like, okay, now we're sending you away, like your time is over. So they sent him to Italy. He had to pay a shit ton of money because he was like took up 3 seats to like lay on the plane, and then they also made him pay for the 3 seats in front of him or behind. It was wild. And then they end up dumping him in a refugee camp in Italy, and the man hasn't even gotten PT. Like he can't walk.
Wow. And
has no money or anything, and no way of like getting back home. And so this guy, so I went to an Eritrean restaurant because I was trying to find the community in Italy. They're just as hard to find as they were to find in New York. I found a restaurant, and then the guy knew everybody, and so he kind of introduced me. So he took in the guy who got hit and would like feed him and like take care of him, and he ended up having to teach himself how to walk. And last I heard from him was like 2 years ago. That's one thing I regret about deleting my Facebook, because all the people I met I like no longer connected to. But I think he was still trying to get back home and like couldn't get back home. But just like stuff like that, and like you meet people. Like there's one person, because I interned with a Eritrean owned migrant catering group, and like this one guy, he was from, I want to say Nigeria, but he ended up in Libya, and Libya is just not a place you want to end up as. And he just like went through unspeakable things in the prisons, and like went on a boat and made it over. I met Abba Muse Zarai, who's an Eritrean who has single-handedly saved like 150,000 like refugees on boats. Just like met some really incredible people and like stories and stuff, and that really, I think, for me, it like just like further solidified like we have to be together. Because, like, there's so much pain and hurt, but because of shame and because of, like, I don't know how it is in Tigrinya, but in Amharic it's called nor, which is, like, shame. But it just means it deeper, I think. And it's just, like, because of that, like, we don't talk to each other, and we could be helping each other. But that, I think, is why it's so important, just like, wrapping it back to Habesha. It's, like, that's why, for me, it's, like, been so important to, like, be like, we're together. Because, like, seeing firsthand what people were going through in Libya, or in Italy, coming from Libya, and I want to go to... I'd ideally love to go to Lebanon next, because there's so much stuff happening there. But it's just like we have to, like, there's so much stuff happening to our people, like, collectively. And it's just like, come on. Like, we should be together, but because of, like, this and judgment and shame and, like, labels, like, people don't want to talk to each other. And it's just like, we're falling apart globally, you know, and internally. And it's just...
So it just depends on the space you're in, because it's like, when you see, and that's the thing I've noticed about New York that I need to like get out of, because it's like everyone is so, I don't want to say everyone, like for the most part you get an accepting like feel here, like everyone belongs, like you walk into different communities, you can feel safe, all these things, and so you get this like moment of like everything is fine, and it's such a big city where you can like convince yourself that that's the world. And it isn't until you leave or you go back home or you like go abroad where you're like, no, it's not, like everything is not fixed. We were just in this bubble that like feels like everything is fine. So I think I've fallen into that a little bit where I'm like, oh, it's okay. Like I can walk through Harlem, and especially like coming from PWI to like living in Harlem, like I'm like, oh my God, everything is great. And so, but it's not, and I think it's so easy in regards to where people are kind of just like don't care, where it's like you don't feel like you have to care.
Yeah.
Because for the most part, if you want to just like be head empty about things, you can.
I think a lot of people, especially like as like this like Habesha brand is growing, like people don't want to disrupt it, and I'm like, I don't know, like people are dying back home.
No, literally, yeah, and that's.
Based on ethnicity. What is Habesha? It's defining what ethnicity's culture.
But it's so easy to forget when you're just like, you know, you go to Brooklyn, go house shopping, and everyone's chilling, looking good, and you're like, oh, fine, you know, like looking fly, like, it's hard. It's hard. And I don't even think it's like calling out, I feel like it's like calling in, or like hilarious.
I've been talking to people a lot about the cultural differences between West Africa and East Africa, and like, I think we're both deeply religious, but I feel like West Africa is like, I'm so confident God's got me. I'm number one. Versus Eritreans and Ethiopians, I feel like I was like talking to someone recently who like fought in the war, and like she fought from like age 12, and she was like telling us about how like when she integrated back to society, like people were expecting her to get married, and it was like a complete switch in like social structure, whatever. And I'm like, you should write a book about this. And she's like, no, God knows what I did. I'm like, what?
I know. They do that so much.
They're like, no, God knows.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
No one else knows.
Yes, and sometimes it's also like, I feel like we're taught to not brag about stuff. 100%. Where it's like only your parents can brag about you, and that's it. Like, you're not supposed to go around and be like, oh, I'm this. Like, you're not supposed. Like, when I went back home recently, my mom and I separated a lot from the community. For so many reasons. She's avoided the community, and I haven't seen them in like 5 years. And so the graduation party I went to recently, like, everyone was telling me, and they're like, oh my God, like, are you too good for us now? Like, you're in New York. Like, and I was like, if it would have been me a couple years ago, I would have been like back into that self of like cowering, being like, oh my God, like humble and like all these things. And I was like, yeah, no, I'm a photographer in New York doing my thing. Like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm living my life. Like, walking away unbothered, and like people were shocked, and I was like, I'm sick of it. Like, I'm sick of it. And especially because I've met so many dope-ass Habeshas here, and like people just doing their thing, and I'm like, I wish I knew that and I think that's what my project is going to form into.
But like, we all had to like leave.
Exactly. And I think that's what I think my project it's been slowly solidifying into, where I'm just like, I want to photograph what I wish I saw.